ESPN host Mike Greenberg has a list of the NFL coaches that are on the hot seat, and man, he got one of them completely wrong. We'll talk about it. It's the Jake Asman Football Show, and it starts right now.
Oh, yeah. It's the Jake Asman Football Show. Brought to you by BetUS. Sign up now and triple your bonus. That's 125%. Let's get into some NFL football. Presented by BetUS Sportsbook and Casino. And here's your host, Jake Asman.
Oh, yeah, baby. We are indeed powered by BetUS. Use my link in the description or the pinned comment and sign up and be a part of the BetUS Sportsbook. They, of course, are offering a 125% sign-up bonus up to $2,000 on your first three deposit. Let's talk about now, as we kind of dive in and talk all things football on this show, a list by Mike Greenberg that's making the rounds, ranking the top 5 coaches that are on the hot seat entering the upcoming year. And I'll put the graphic up on the screen and we could react all together. Number 1 is Jets head coach Robert Saleh. Number 2 is Eagles head coach Nick Sirianni. Number 3 is Cowboys head coach Mike McCarthy. Number 4 is Bears head coach Matt Eberflus. And then number 5 is Giants head coach Brian Daboll. I have no issue with 4 of the 5 names that are listed here. No issue at all. What confuses me is how can you have Matt Eberflus on this list? It feels like the Bears are committed to Eberflus for at least 2 years when they decided after this past season where they went 7-10 but played better down the stretch that Eberflus was going to be their guy. Because now that you have Caleb Williams and now that you made that decision to build your franchise around Caleb, the last thing you could do, or the worst thing I believe you could potentially do, is to then get rid of the head coach after a year, bring in a new coach, new offensive system, right? Because you're bringing in a new offensive coordinator, and that would be a terrible idea for a young quarterback. So how is Eberflus listed here in the top 5? He won 7 games last year. You're committed to seeing it through. I don't know how you could put Eberflus on this list. The name that should be on this list is Saints head coach Dennis Allen. The Saints have been mired in mediocrity in a putrid division. Last season, they missed the playoffs. Last season was the first year they spent $40+ million a year for Derek Carr. How is Dennis Allen now, who's been there for a little bit, not under more pressure than Matt Eberflus? Eberflus has the built-in excuse. You got to give me time with my quarterback. But Dennis Allen doesn't. So if you're breaking down Greenberg's list here, how is Eberflus in the top 5? You can't put him there. Another name I'd consider, Doug Peterson, going into year 3 in Jacksonville. They gave Trevor Lawrence the big money. All of a sudden, Trevor Lawrence doesn't play better. Well, you can't get rid of Lawrence. You committed to him. What do you do with the head coach? Well, maybe you try something else. I think he should be on this list more. So that doesn't make any sense to me. I don't think you can add any first-year head coach who's under the most pressure, who's on the hot seat. But I do think when it comes to guys in their second year or third year, that's where you have to look. And that's why when you look at the names here, to me, Mike Greenberg is spot on with number 1. Jets head coach Robert Saleh is going into his 4th year. There were a lot of people who were saying, even with the Rodgers injury last year, Saleh didn't do enough to warrant getting a 4th year. But the Rodgers injury saved him. I would push back on that and say he had the worst quarterback situation in football by far. He has built a top 5 defense. They did win 3 of their final 5 games with Trevor Siemian at quarterback. So to me, it's not all bad with Robert Saleh, though he does need to win this year. But I have no issue with him being number 1. Number 2 being Nick Sirianni, 0 issue as well. Because think about it. Nick Sirianni came very close, just like Robert Saleh, seemingly, to losing his job last year. He fired both the coordinators. So you have a new offensive coordinator, a new defensive coordinator. Well, if that doesn't work, the only thing you could do is you change the head coach. So Sirianni being on this list after that Eagles collapse, that to me makes sense. But I don't know if I can put Sirianni ahead of Mike McCarthy. To me, my list would go Saleh 1, Mike McCarthy 2, Nick Sirianni 3. And I'll tell you why. Because Mike McCarthy is lucky to be employed right now, right? We thought maybe the Jets would move on from Saleh. We thought maybe the Eagles would fire Sirianni with how last season ended. Did anyone think Mike McCarthy, as you're watching the Dallas Cowboys get absolutely destroyed by Jordan Love and the Packers at home in that playoff game? Anyone think Mike McCarthy was going to survive that? With Bill Belichick being out there seemingly? I didn't. I'm sure many of you watching this show didn't. So the fact that McCarthy is not higher here, that to me would be the one thing I would swap with Greeny's list here. But ultimately, McCarthy has to win this year. Not just because Belichick's out there, but because what else can you do if you're Jerry? You can't fire yourself. He wouldn't do that. He's given Mike McCarthy plenty of time. The Cowboys have to have a big year, get to a conference championship game. Otherwise, how does Mike McCarthy retain his job? How? The last name on the list is Brian Daboll, the Giants head coach. I am not as down on Daboll as maybe some are, because there's a lot of people who think the Giants are going to be the worst team in the league. I personally don't think they will be, because I think Daboll is a good coach. He went to the playoffs in his first year with Daniel Jones at quarterback. Last year, they started terribly. I think they were 2-10, and he somehow was able to win some games with Tommy DeVito down the stretch. And I was at the first game DeVito appeared in against the Jets. They were afraid to let him throw. And we went from that to Tommy Cutlets becoming the biggest thing in town. I think Daboll is a good coach. I think he has a bad quarterback situation. Now, will Giants ownership understand that and be willing to see it through with Belichick seemingly out there? Maybe, maybe not. But as long as the Giants aren't the worst team in the league, as long as they're where they were around the same record from last season, right? 6 or 7 wins. I think Brian Daboll is going to get another year where they will finally invest at the quarterback spot, whether that be they try and sign Dak Prescott if something happens with Dallas and the Cowboys where they can't come to terms on a deal, or if something happens where it's clear Jones is not the guy and the Giants would then be all in to move up and take a quarterback. But I think if anyone who watched the offseason version of Hard Knocks saw, there is a strong likelihood that Daniel Jones is in his final year with the Giants. His first preseason game on Saturday. I know it's preseason, but man, he looked terrible. Making the same mistakes he's made for 6 years now. Bad decision-making. Careless with the football. That pick 6 he threw in the end zone was a disgrace. And I don't care if it's preseason. A 6-year quarterback shouldn't be making that type of mistake. But I think Daboll is too good of a coach after what we saw last year with the way he was able to win some games with DeVito at quarterback for this team to be, worst record in the NFL territory where then you'd be changing the coach. So I don't think this list from Greeny here is poor besides Eberflus being at 4. I think Dennis Allen should be on this list instead of Eberflus, and I would swap Sirianni and McCarthy. But Robert Saleh, to me, is number 1 on the list. He has to be number 1 on the list because ultimately the Jets didn't acquire Aaron Rodgers for them to go out there and go 9-8 and lose in the wild card round. The Jets acquired Aaron Rodgers because they felt like they were a quarterback away from making some noise. No one's saying you got to win the Super Bowl if you're Robert Saleh, but he's got to win a playoff game, in my opinion, to guarantee himself safe. Forget just the playoffs for a second. Something the Jets have not done since the 2010 season. Longest playoff drought in the NFL. Longest playoff drought amongst any team in the 4 major sports. It's them and the Buffalo Sabres in hockey. They haven't won the division since 2002, over 20 years. That, to me, should be an obtainable goal. And if you look right now at BetUS Sportsbook, the New York Jets have now moved in front of the Buffalo Bills to be the favorites in the division. The AFC East, the odds, Jets are plus 170. The Buffalo Bills are plus 175. Those have changed. Miami is plus 200. And New England, they stink, is at plus 2,600. So that just adds more pressure to Robert Saleh. It does. The New York Jets have the team to do it. They have a top 5 defense. They added Mike Williams. They added Tyron Smith. They drafted Olu Fashanu. So they have real contingency plans on the offensive line if, God forbid, there's injuries, which you know there will be. You have a legit backup in Tyrod Taylor, so you can't, if you're Robert Saleh, say, well, Rodgers got hurt, I didn't have a quarterback. No, you have a legit backup. If Aaron Rodgers suffers a conventional quarterback injury, he misses, let's say, 3 games with an injured ankle, Tyrod Taylor could go 2-1. If Aaron gives you 14 games, Jets need to be at least a 10 or 11 win team, which might be good enough to win the AFC East. And that's how you got to look at it. Saleh's in year 4. He's 18-33 as the coach of the Jets. Not all his fault. But a lot of times you don't get a year 4 when your first 3 are losing seasons, even if it's not your fault. So that's why I think Robert Saleh is the head coach in the NFL that is on the hottest of seats going into 2024. Agree or disagree? You can let me know down in the comments. You're watching the Jake Asman Football Show presented by my friends over at BetUS. Let's quickly pause and let's talk about BetUS.
This video is brought to you by BetUS Sportsbook and Casino.
Michael Vick here at BetUS.com. Get it all. Huge bonuses, great odds, a race book, live in-game betting, and a casino. BetUS, my online sportsbook and casino.
Check it out. Thanks to BetUS for sponsoring today's video. 125% sign-up bonus up to $2,000 on your first 3 deposits. Use my link right down below in the comment section or in the description for this video. Once again, shout out to BetUS for being today's sponsor. When it comes to the other coaches that were on the list, I seriously think you look at the names, look at the teams. One of these teams, in theory, is going to have Bill Belichick as their coach next year. Now, I don't think Bill would ever work for the Jets, so I removed them. But I could see Belichick in Philadelphia. I could see Belichick in Dallas. I could see Belichick with the team that really gave him his start, the New York Giants. And it's interesting, right? 3 of the 5 names on the hot seat list are all from the same division. And I find that intriguing. At the end of the day, doesn't it kind of feel like if Belichick is going to coach again next year, it's going to be coaching for a team that's in the NFC East? Doesn't it feel that way? If you have a comment or a question and you're watching the Jake Asman Football Show live, write it in. Jay writes in, why isn't McDaniel on this list? I don't think his seat is as hot as the other guys we mentioned. Miami has been a playoff team the last 2 years. Now, they have not won a playoff game yet. I understand that. But I think the seats are hotter for the guys we named in front of Mike McDaniel down in Miami. That's how I look at it. Lane Kerner writes in, the Lane Train. How do you feel about Brian Daboll? I think Brian Daboll is a good football coach. I do. I think he's in a unique spot where his quarterback situation is so putrid, if Jones is what I think he is, that the Giants' best case scenario might be only being good enough to win 6 or 7 games. And then what do you do if you're John Mara? Do you show patience with a guy you believe in? Or throughout the course of another losing season, are you losing faith that Daboll's actually your guy? What we saw from Hard Knocks would indicate to me they think Brian Dable can be their guy, that they're investing in the long view for this football team. We saw how close they came to potentially trading up for Drake May or for Jaden Daniels. They didn't do it. The argument can be made, though, well, should the Giants have taken J.J. McCarthy instead? Should they have taken Michael Penix instead? Rather than go into another year where Daniel Jones is your starting quarterback going into the season. Robert says McCarthy should not have a job now. Exactly why I think you could honestly argue McCarthy could be one in front of Saleh. If you told me Saleh's one, McCarthy's two, and you say, hey, Jake, I actually think it should be McCarthy ahead of Saleh for these reasons, I'm in. Now, me personally, I'm going Saleh one. But I do think there's a compelling argument to be made that McCarthy should be number one on this list. Andrew says, Dable takes too much heat. He's fine. Once again, I'll say this. Find me the coach that can win without competent quarterback play. You can't. Speaking of which, I'll say this. I don't think the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to have a great season. And I don't think Mike Tomlin's on the hot seat. He just signed an extension. But I do think this is the first year that the Steelers have a losing season under Mike Tomlin. And then I wonder what happens then. I don't think they'd fire him, right? But what if they're 7-10? How's Pittsburgh going to react to that and that streak being stopped? Lane writes in, how do you feel about Zach Wilson going to the Vikings? Well, Lane, I don't feel anything about that because Zach Wilson is on the Broncos. How about that? How about that? Sean writes in, Steelers historically keep their coaches forever and write out the bad seasons. They do, but they don't really have very many bad seasons, Sean. I mean, a bad season for Pittsburgh is 9-8, 10-7. Mike Tomlin has never had a losing season. Adam writes in, I wonder if there's going to be any one-and-done head coaches this year. It's certainly possible. I mean, it seems like the patience for NFL owners has never been less, which is why I think Saleh definitely should be number one because he's in his fourth year and basically got a mulligan last year because of what happened with Aaron Rodgers in the fourth play of the Jets season. That's the question. Now, of the first-year coaches, who'd be the most likely to lose their job? I mean, don't you got to start with the Panthers because of how erratic their ownership group seemingly is? David Tepper? Would they fire Dave Canales after 1 year? I mean, they fired Frank Reich after not even a full season. He didn't even make it through year one. So I guess you start with them, but it does seem unlikely we'd have someone fired in year one. It does seem unlikely. A super chat from M. King has come through. Thank you, M. King. Saleh gets too much grief because Joe Douglas left him with ridiculous QBs. His growth as a head coach appears he is getting comfortable managing all areas of the team. This year will be defining for me. Well, I'm with you, M. King. I think Saleh at times gets too much criticism from Jet fans. That said, I completely agree. This is a defining season for the head coach of the Jets. Because if they don't win, they're going to make changes. Because the roster is certainly good enough. We told you at the top, BetUS now has the Jets as the betting favorites to win the AFC East. That tells you a lot. This team's good enough. Now they got to get it done. Iconic Aware checks in with a super chat. Russell Wilson traded to the Giants midseason. Bridge quarterback. I doubt it. I don't think Russell Wilson is very good. I think the Giants would be better off just bottoming out than trying to squeeze a couple extra wins with Russell Wilson. That's how I would look at it. Robert says Bryce Young is another Zach Wilson. Too early to say. He's played 1 year in a horrible situation. Remember, Trevor Lawrence was worse than Zach Wilson after both their rookie years. Trevor Lawrence had Urban Meyer in that mess. Bryce Young had the Panthers changing the head coach in the middle of his rookie year, learning a new system, now learning another one. Like, we got to be patient with Bryce Young and give him at least this year to find out. Have a much better idea of what he is. Credible commenter says, JA football show is pretty sick. Thanks for watching. If you're watching, please hit that like button. Support us. Support BetUS for giving me this platform to talk all things football, in addition to what we do on the normal Jake Asman show, where it's Jet focused. This is a separate entity, as we explained with the first show last week, which was a fantasy football preview. Sco checks in with a super chat. So if Robert gets fired, who should the Jets hire? I think it's way too early to even consider this, but the name to look at is probably Mike Vrabel, right? Vrabel will be out there. People will throw out Bellichick. I don't see it, Sco, but you got to consider it. Ladies and gentlemen, for the first time in the history of the Jake Asman Football Show, 5 channel memberships were just gifted.
Free stuff.
John, Adam is cool, Dorian H., John Prechusi, and Ali Shafi, all officially as maniacs. That's right. You could still be an as maniac on the Jake Asman Football Show. Oh, we got more.
Bang! Bang!
Ladies and gentlemen, M. King is gifted another 5 memberships. Thank you, M. King. Here we go. Dewey Nation, Andrew Fialco, Joseph Freeman, P-Viz, and Daniel Yanez. You are all officially as maniacs. Welcome. Appreciate the support, M. King. Hope you guys are enjoying the Jake Asman Football Show here. M. King, keeping us honest with the memberships. He wrote in, by the way, looked like a great time at T-Square. Jake, you're the man. Thank you so much, M. King. Appreciate your support. Darren writes in, Danny Dimes is trash. Why do the Giants get a pass in the same market? Look, I think it ultimately comes down to this. The expectations for the Giants are not what the expectations are for the Jets. And I also think because the Giants did go to the playoffs 2 years ago with this current regime, there's less scrutiny on them. Fair or not? Do the Giants sometimes get more of a pass than the Jets with similar stories? I think you could definitely argue that. I think you could say that. That's fine. But Giants have also won more than the Jets. If the Jets want to change the narrative, it goes back to what we were saying when we went through the list here on the Jake Asman Football Show. The coach is under the most pressure on the hottest of seats. Saleh's number 1 for a reason. He's got to win. That's the bottom line. I want to thank everyone who took time to watch the Jake Asman Football Show. Give us your thoughts in the comments down below. Give us your coaches you believe are in the hottest of seats entering the 2024 season. Once again, thank you to BetUS for sponsoring today's Jake Asman Football Show. If you're looking for a new book this football season, BetUS is, of course, the answer. My name is Jake Asman. Follow me on Twitter at Jake Asman, Instagram at Jake Asman to get more content. Once again, this has been the Jake Asman Football Show. I will talk to you guys later this week. Thanks for tuning in. And of course, once again, thanks to BetUS for being our sponsor.
This video is brought to you by BetUS Sportsbook and Casino.